I'm now going to explain your pulse wave velocity results. Maybe you remember getting tested laying on the bed, the cuff around your thigh inflated, and we had to kind of find your pulse on your neck. And with this tonometer here, we're able to capture a pulse, the heartbeat. The pulse comes up to the neck, and it also goes down through the femoral artery into your leg. What happens is each heartbeat is kind of splitting off in two waves. So once we capture it at the neck, that one, since it's closer to the heart, will come first, and then it will send it down at the thigh. And we actually measure the distance between your neck and the top of that cuff on the thigh, and we can, from there, with that distance, we can actually calculate the velocity. Now, the way this works is when your heart pumps, it goes out in the wave. Now, if you think about like a hose you might have at home for your garden, and some of them have multiple nozzles on them. And for the ones, there's one that's called a jet. It's got a real small hole on it, and when you spray it, if you spray it close against the wall, it's actually going to bounce back at you. So I like to think of the arteries, that system is working like that. If you have real kind of stiff arteries, they're not real flexible, and maybe there's some atherosclerosis. It's a bit, the arterial wall is not, it's not nice and open. It's a bit smaller kind of hole for the blood to go through. Then if it's real stiff, the blood's going to really go through, and the velocity at which it's traveling through your body is going to be fast. And that means your heart has to have a higher pressure to get the blood throughout the whole body, and to kind of go against if there's any backflow. The pulse goes through the body and it might actually come back. So again, like spraying that hose against the wall, you've got that backflow, and now the heart goes to pulse again, and over time that's going to cause some trouble. So the pulse wave velocity, it's important to know, the first kind of part of the test, the cuff inflated on your arm, and it did an assessment of kind of your central arterial pressure and other, it's called the pulse wave analysis. So it's looking at the pulse itself. Now the second part, where we get the pulse at your neck and your thigh, it's called the pulse wave velocity. That is actually, in terms of the research, that's kind of considered the gold standard for measuring the stiffness of your arteries. So this is the most important kind of number that we look at in science. And so some of the other numbers you may have heard before, that you've got from pulse wave analysis, they're quite helpful, but this one is really the one that we look at. If there's one number to really look at, this is the most important one. So just looking over your results, there's going to be some patient details on the front. This person was 68-year-old male, and this report is going to explain the pulse wave velocity measurement, looking at your aortic stiffness. So aorta is that large artery that moves the blood from your heart to your kidney, your lungs, and your brain, and the rest of your body. But those are the main areas. So it's one of the biggest arteries, and it's kind of going through the front of your body. That's why we kind of capture it right here as close as we can at the carotid artery, and then at the femoral artery, just on that cuff, as high up on your leg as possible. So as I said, it's an internationally recognized measure for determining the stiffness of your arteries. And because your aorta is directly connected to all these important organs, including the brain, heart, and kidneys, then the stiffness of your artery from your neck to your leg is actually one of the best predictors of your cardiovascular risk. I'll explain that. So if your arteries are young and or healthy, the arteries are supple and relaxed, and the pulse travels nice and slow along the aorta here, gets the blood through the lower body, and then is ready again for the next pulse. So as we do get older, naturally, even if you had the healthiest diet, exercise, no kind of genetic predisposition, your arteries naturally do get stiffer, and it makes that pulse go a little bit faster. Now, if you add lifestyle factors such as smoking, you're not exercising, and you have high blood pressure or hypertension, and also if you have diabetes, these can all prematurely stiffen your arteries, so making that pulse go through really quick, and that's not ideal. So once we know kind of your heartbeats, we've got the pulse here, we've got the pulse down there, we've calculated the length of the artery and the speed of the pulse, we can actually calculate velocity. So in this person's case, the velocity was 12.1, and that's in milliseconds. And so generally, or meters per second, either way, generally the lower values are better. And lower values are associated with less risk of heart attack and stroke. And so just going on to the second page, what they do is they compare it to the general population. So there's two norm comparisons. The first one here was a clinical trial in Europe. So again, if you don't have a kind of European descent, do not think of this as kind of being set in stone, because different backgrounds may have different norms. So this was in Europe. Pulse wave velocity was measured in over 11,000 patients, and none of them had diabetes. So if you have diabetes, maybe don't focus on the norm too much, but it is good to know your number in case you come back again. You can compare yourself to yourself. So here, this is your pulse wave velocity here on the side, plotted against the age. So again, as you get older, the pulse wave velocity, you can see on the norm, it does naturally rise. So here it has a range, from 20 to 80 years old. It goes anywhere from kind of the norm would be around, around 9 or 10, up here as you're getting into 80, it's about 19. Now, it also gives your blood pressure. Now, this is just the normal blood pressure that was found at the blood pressure cuff. So considering your pulse wave velocity, your age, and your blood pressure, if your blood pressure in this person's case is 146/91, and based on the age, then the pulse wave velocity of, what was it again, 12.1, if you look on here, is going to fall into this top one. So 12.1 is less than, 12.1 is the pulse velocity here. Pulse wave velocity is 12.1, which is less than 13. So this is actually optimal blood pressure for this person. Now, as you can see, this person's age is up a bit higher, so possibly a little bit higher blood pressure normally than someone at 20 years old, but so that's why the normal blood pressure is 120/80. This person's a bit high, but considering the age and the blood pressure, then that pulse wave is actually quite low for that person. So that's great news. So in this case, the norm is somewhere up here, but this person actually had low or healthier arteries than people in the same age with the same kind of blood pressure. So there you have it. Your pulse wave velocity is plotted on the graph with the dot. If it's below 12 meters per second, which is adjusted for this kind of distance here, then and so if it's below 12, in this case 12.1, it's more or less there, and it's below the line, so that's true, then your pulse wave is normal for your age and for your blood pressure. You have a normal risk of stroke, heart attack, organ damage for your age and blood pressure. Now, if it's above 12, then and it's above the line, then you have relatively stiffer arteries, which does naturally increase your risk of developing cardiovascular disease and organ damage that than other patients who are your same age with your same blood pressure. So your doctor might recommend that you try and lower your pulse wave velocity by doing these kind of known lifestyle behaviors. So you can stop smoking, you can increase your exercise. Also, some people just go hard for an hour a day. Sometimes it's actually also helpful to just do little breaks throughout the day. Not that you have to do an hour at the end of the day when you're pretty tired, but just having smaller breaks throughout the day, at least 10 minutes. You can improve your diet. You can cut down on salt and fat. And if you've been prescribed anti-hypertension medication or high blood pressure meds, then make sure you actually take them. And on this next page is the second norm chart. So it's comparing your measurement with a healthy population. In other words, people that had no cardiovascular disease and they had no diabetes. So this one's a bit more strict. The other one I showed you, they just had no diabetes, but this one also no cardiovascular disease. So again, this is taken at University of Cambridge in the UK. So, if you kind of don't have that background, then maybe the norm chart's not the best to go by, but anyway, it does give you an indicator in any case. So for your age and pulse wave velocity, this one doesn't take into account blood pressure. Again, you want to be on or below the line, so that's fantastic for this person, just on the line there. And you want it to be below 12. As I said, they're just at kind of 12.1, so that's fine, because it can get up to, say, 14 is pretty high. So, and then you can have as low as kind of 8, 9, things like that. So it's kind of, let's say 8 to 14 is the range. And so 12 is starting to get up there, but not kind of in the danger zone quite yet. And considering this person's age, it's actually pretty normal to be at that level. So, yeah, if your pulse wave is above the line or above 12, then you have higher than normal pulse wave velocity and more likely to develop cardiovascular disease than people who are your same age with lower pulse wave velocity. So again, same recommendations there, as you can see, and that's all I have, I would say, in terms of looking at, if you're comparing pulse wave velocity versus your pulse wave analysis, this is the one that they really look at in terms of, if you want one number, this is the one. So this person, 12.1 is their pulse wave velocity, and if they can try and make some health behavior changes in their life to get that number a little bit lower, changing what you eat is probably the number one place to start, but also increasing physical activity, even if it's just taking the steps instead of the lift. Those are very little things that you can do to help improve this number, but yeah, it does take a bit of time. Usually, you wouldn't want to get that measured again for another probably 6 months, because it actually takes a long time to get it at a bad level, but it also takes a long time, as you can imagine, to get it in a healthy level. So, so yeah, there you have it. Thanks for listening.